Welcome everybody to Farm Sanctuary's Sanctuary Speaker Series. My name is Gene Bauer. I'm the president and co-founder of Farm Sanctuary, and I'm very excited today to announce that we have JoVonna and Eugene Cooke from Grow Where You Are to talk about the work they're doing in Atlanta to feed communities, to create opportunities by growing food in the city. And I think that this is an amazing model. It is one that heals the earth. It is one that heals us. It is one that connects us to the land and the soil, which is so critically important right now. You know, our food system is extremely harmful to animals, to the earth, and ourselves. And the work they're doing at Grow Where You Are, I think, is an amazing solution. So I will now throw it to Miko Brown, our Senior Manager of Social Justice Programs.
Thank you so much, Jean. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. We are very, very excited to be here in conversation with JoVonna and Eugene for another Sanctuary Speakers Series conversation. So I first want to tell you about these two amazing individuals who we are fortunate enough to be able to be talking with today. So JoVonna Johnson Cooke is a vegan chef and food justice activist working in Atlanta. She's the co-founder of My Two Foods, a vegan food delivery service, and a lunch program developer. She's working to create culturally appropriate and accessible educational materials that highlight the benefits of healthy nutrition through a vegan diet. JoVonna is also credited with establishing My Two Foods plant-based pregnancy meal service, the first of its kind, owned and operated by a BIPOC woman in Metro Atlanta. And JoVonna co-founded Grow Where You Are with Eugene Cooke. And Eugene is an internationally recognized food justice activist and urban farmer, utilizing veganic growing methods. In 2014, Slow Food Atlanta selected Eugene for their Food Justice Award. From 2018 through 2020, Eugene was a Robert Wood Johnson Culture of Health Leaders Fellow. And presently, Eugene is an equity advisor for Shift Health Accelerator while continuing food production for local markets, restaurants, and families. Eugene was also selected by Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms to sit on the committee to advise the transformation of the Atlanta Detention Center to a Center for Equity. Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you both so much for joining us. So glad to have you all here. So we wanted to start off, there are so many things that I want to talk with you all about. I feel like it's so important for us to actually have the opportunity to be in conversation with with growers who are directly growing food and working with the land. And I think often we hear talk about how disconnected we are from land, how disconnected we are from food. And I think particularly for Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks, there's also that history and the ongoing reality of displacement and enslavement and that disconnection from our traditional foodways. So I'm curious to hear from you all how you got into the work that you are doing, how you got connected to this work with food and land. Was that something that was passed down to you through your family, elders, and ancestors in that way? Or was it something that you kind of initiated and came upon on your own and then began that learning journey to this work?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Miko. I did have some of this farming passed on to me by my maternal grandparents. My mother's family were farmers in Oklahoma, and they came there, part of the bloodline came there through the Trail of Tears. So we had strong European heritage, strong indigenous heritage, and African heritage blended into the family on my mother's side. And they were farming on 80 acres and also kept a home garden close to the house. So myself, growing up in Southern California, I would visit my maternal grandparents every couple summers. And as I was growing up, so as a child up into young adulthood, and seeing that space transform as I transformed, it was really powerful. Because that was the space where I learned how to be quiet, where I learned how to observe nature, where I learned how to be alone, because 80 acres is a big swath of land, and we would go out, and their house was on a road that when I went out to the road and I looked all the way this way or all the way that way, it was a gravel road. I didn't see anything, nothing. And when they wanted to go into town, or people in their area would go into town, they'd have to drive past my grandparents' house. They'd stop by, they'd say, hey, we're going into town. Do you need anything? Then they'd come back at night. My grandmother would have made a pie or something to exchange for them going to get her toilet paper or whatever. So this was also in the time period where TV went off. You know, I mean, when I was there, 2 o'clock or 12 o'clock in the morning, TV, they played the American flag on the TV and the TV went off. And that was it. It was nothing, that was it. So I would watch thunderstorms and things like that and just watch how thunderstorms would move over flat land in Oklahoma. So unbeknownst to myself, it was training me for a more contemplative life that I wasn't interested in, wasn't wanting to go into, was not nothing. It was not my idea. And so there was a big gap between that time period and becoming a grower. But meantime, my parents always enforced or encouraged that we kept a small garden on the side of our house. So I was always gardening the whole time. I was never connecting that small garden to my grandparents' farm. The garden was something in my mind that I just had to do because my mother wanted fresh peppers and she wanted fresh tomatoes. And it's just something that I had to do. Like I had to vacuum and take out the trash. It was really that simple. And as I became a father for the first time in 1999, all of that congealed, and I just, by instinct, went out into the backyard and started planting a garden. And that, from there, changed the whole trajectory of my life. I was a visual artist by study and by trade. That's where I was when at 28, I made a very big transition in my
life. I think for me, it came up. I know for me, it came up a bit later, and a lot of it is like as an adult, having recollections, like coming to like insights from as an adult, having an experience in the garden, having experience on the farm, and then realizing that growing up, there were so many things that I took for granted in my environment just because I was in the space. So. Like Eugene, I grew up in Southern California. And in Southern California, most people that I grew up around are like the adults coming from the South, coming from agricultural backgrounds in one form or another, whether it's through sharecropping but whatever it was, like that was still in them. So it wasn't uncommon for a neighbor, even in the city, to have, I mean, in California, Southern California, abundant fruit trees. Or like my babysitters would have plots of little garden plots where they were growing their own collard greens and their own mustard greens and turnips. And I remember even my babysitter had sugar cane. So much so that growing up eating, I for the longest, I could not even stomach sugar cane because I ate so much of it as a kid, you know, just on the porch in Southern California, in Long Beach, you know, a city girl, but still having these elements from the South and from agriculture showing up in my life. And but the recollection of it, or just how integral it was to my life, didn't really hit until I was reintroduced to growing when I met Eugene in Atlanta as a young adult. Having interest in food and veganism and health from a health perspective. Wanting to grow, but not really having any direction in it. And then still also just being caught up in my own kind of like life and trajectory where it was, I felt like it was sitting me in that time period. So growing wasn't anything that was, I was thinking about in the way that we do it now. But then having met Eugene, coming to growing and farming, and just in that experience of communing with the earth, like learning from the earth, like just memories sparking, you know, that I didn't even know that I had, experiences and healing and growth happening, that it was like as if the call was always there, but finally I'm answering it, right? And that just created the path, like the path just unfolded for us, I mean, for me to be in this work that we are doing now. It's, I guess in that sense, it was a natural progression. Everything was, unbeknownst to me, pointing in this direction to come back to the earth, come back to the land, come back to the service of it, find myself as a part of it an integral part of it, in communion with it. And now just the work is around allowing for the space for others to experience that, and to heal through that, and to understand it in and of themselves.
Beautiful. I love that. I love hearing both of your stories, and just that family piece around like growing food and what that meant, and that sense of like being called to do this and to operate in this way and to be in connection and land with that way, and that sense of like remembrance in the doing of it. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how that veganic lens and approach kind of came in for you all and what that means to you all now. I know you were talking a little bit about, part of it was that health perspective, but then, that shifting a little bit as you were doing that, the growing. So I'm curious to hear just more about where that initiated for you all, and then how that's kind of grown and evolved, and what is your understanding of the importance of that now for you all in the work that you do?
I can go first. How it was for me was just being 16 years old, and again in Long Beach, California. And California already has its it has its thing, it has its vibe, about health, but just growing up in what many would consider like the hood, in a lot of ways. And my friend, my dear friend, my dear brother, his name is Ak, we call him Ak, or his name is Deshaun. Him at the time just studying, he was coming into Rastafari. And which, part of it, a large part of it is having a liberty, a life that is integral and in tune with the earth. Your sustenance, your healing is from the earth. That you are one and the same with the earth, And him coming to me and just saying, actually it was a book. It was called Healing with Whole Foods. And he was saying, hey, we got to change like how we're living, how we're eating, our bodies. Or I remember another part. There was a magazine, maybe it was a Source or something, but it was the rapper Common was talking about a conversation that he had with Erykah Badu, how she put a leaf on his plate and was like, why would you continue to allow your body to be a graveyard? And when I saw that, I was like, whoa, like I thought it was extreme, but I was like, man, that's really what it is, right? That's really what it is when we're taking this in. And so then how do we expect to have vitality, have life, when we are consumers of and participants in death, And so that's where the major shift came for me. And then just by virtue of like having exposure to people like Queen Afua and Dr. Africa and like the Dick Gregory and all these people who, had already had the platform that I could now just step into and be informed and, have access to tools in this journey, and just like a whole new world opened up, that was very much seeped in like our culture, and in ways and means of just navigating through the systems of oppression. Like it became so much so that like even having a vegan diet at that time for me was like a revolutionary act in and of itself. And I'm 16, I want to consider myself a revolutionary and rebellious anyway. So this is like, oh man, this is another piece to that, How about be revolutionary? How about be rebellious in what you consume and how you eat, choose life, in a space where everything around you is kind of crumbling and everything is kind of directing you towards anything but you having a bountiful, beautiful, healthy life. To choose a vegan lifestyle, to choose to honor your body and honor yourself in that way is, a revolutionary act in and of itself. And then as time, went by, it stuck. And then I just got more and more affirmation as I, went through life.
Yeah, similar for me, it was also through hip hop. And that's why I was born in '71. So I saw a time when there wasn't hip hop, and then when hip hop was birthed, and all the way up into the present. And to see how this amazing vehicle of knowledge and information and cultural transformation, how it worked so efficiently from 78 to maybe 98. And then it just has been completely, there's been a very strategic attack and misuse of our musical voice to promote death when it never was doing that. You know, all respect to Shock G, who just left the body, because, you know, the Digital Underground was promoting life and fun and pleasure. And so what I was listening to at the time was a lot of KRS-One and people in Native Tongue Posse, De La and Tribe Called Quest and Jungle Brothers, and especially Jungle Brothers, their album Done by the Forces of Nature. That one really transformed me because they really dug into it. They really dug into it. Public Enemy was digging into it. KRS-One had the song called Beef. So I was just listening to all of this and I'm going, whoa, not knowing that I was receiving information from the 5%ers. I was receiving information from the Nation of Islam. I was receiving information from Garveyites. I didn't know that because I was listening to hip hop and they were distilling all of it down for me. They were giving me the clip notes and saying, okay, this is the main thing you need to understand is that we have to respect each other. We've got to respect life. We've got to honor our temple. We've got to know that we come from the earth. And these are all people who are living in very, very urban environments, very toxic environments. And then years later, as I was in Los Angeles, beginning to really grow with my teacher, Adonijah, at Crenshaw High School, not as a student, but we were using Crenshaw High School. They had a agricultural zone in the back of the school. The interesting thing was that LA Unified School District was putting different facilities in different high schools. So one high school got like an Olympic swimming pool, one high school got a Olympic track, and this high school, Crenshaw, got a 3/4 acre agricultural space in the back of the school with a greenhouse, with irrigation, with everything. And so my teacher had graduated from there in the 70s, and he had come back there and made a relationship with one of the science teachers and was like, we want to use this space because they had stopped using it. So I came to him as a grown man and started working in that space in summertime and vacation, and we were transforming it into a food forest. And he was a very concrete. he is a very strict plant-based vegan. I didn't even know the word vegan. I was already pretty much vegetarian, but mainly for reasons of health and culture. He was the one that framed it to me from a global perspective and really underscored the karmic weight of things. Always layered the spiritual layer onto it and said, listen, the karma of eating these dead animals, the karma of participating in this system. He said, you're already participating in so much death because they're using your tax dollars for war. You're filling up your car with gasoline that's coming from war-torn countries. He said, as much of the karma that you can pull out of it. So again, like JoVonna said, Queen Afua's book, Heal Thyself, studying what Dr. Phil Valentine was talking about. Some really intense teachers. And then there was a teacher named Dr. Kwaku Ando, who released a book called Biblical Mana. And he's a Ghanaian ethnobotanist who was actually appointed by President Carter during his administration. And his book really added the deeper layer of understanding of what it is to have a relationship with plants that have been here before us, that they are actually in the same teachings as of the indigenous teachers that are in my lineage, to help us understand that these plants are our grandparents. Like, we always pouring out water for ancestors that we might have on an altar, but our ancestors are, they're right outside the window. And that shifted my consciousness or began that shift in a deeper way. And so when it came to growing, you know, the main teachers that taught me, they would never think of trying to have animals that we're trying to grow. And even those of us who were studying permaculture systems, we could understand that animals can function inside of these systems as long as they're functioning as themselves and they're not functioning as food. So,
right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. There's so much richness in all that you all are sharing. I'm thinking I have these questions I want to get to, and there's so many beautiful threads just emerging from what you all are saying. But I did want to touch on something that I've heard you all talk about, and that's the importance of spaces for activating the potential of new systems of health and justice for ourselves, as well as giving people the opportunity to engage with and witness workable prototypes. So I'm curious why that's important to hear from your perspective and how we do that, what that looks like, and what are the characteristics, you know, when we're talking about these community spaces and these prototypes, what are the characteristics of these spaces specifically that it's important for people to experience and be able to engage with?
I want to say real quick before I lose it, like all of these things are just ideas, unless and until we have a vehicle to actually actualize it, you know? So that's the beginning of what I would say. And then,
Yeah. I'm super emotional right now. You know, it's such a charged time in our personal histories and our public social dynamic. And over the years of our relationship, JoVonna has continually brought me more and more information that reaffirms and feeds the work and the choices that I've been making for a long time. And recently, last night, as a matter of fact, I started to watch, because JoVonna had already been seeing it, Exterminate All the Brutes on HBO. And it's a 4-part miniseries. Am I saying this right? It's a 4-part documentary series about Western colonization and its effects globally, as well as very specifically here in the United States. Exterminate All the Brutes. And I want to tell you, like, that is the answer to the question, what is the need for these spaces? The need for the spaces is that they already existed and someone came and burned them down. And I'm personally psychologically damaged because of it. And due to that psychological damage, I put out that shrapnel all around myself. And I've had dear people in my life continually remind me of that, and they're the people that I care about the most. So that makes it, you know, unbearably challenging. And when I consult teachers from around the world, some of whom I know and some of whom I just study their content and their work, like Dr. Vandana Shiva or Wangari Maathai or Pierre Rabhi. And fortunately, I had the chance to meet Dr. Kwaku Ando. When I study these teachers, even Sadhguru, they're all saying that what we all need is to touch the earth more. What we all need is more sun on our skin. What we all need is to be eating more fresh, raw, plant-based foods. That happens in the garden. And I say to myself and to everyone here, I do this. I've been doing this 7 days a week for 21 years, and I'm still super toxic and damaged as a person, because 21 years of doing this is nothing compared to hundreds and hundreds of years of watching these spaces destroyed. So we have gone about our new space here, Awali, is a veganic homestead where people can come and see plants in a greenhouse, see plants in the garden, see an orchard, walk in the space, be surrounded in a forest, have a certain semblance of safety, be barefoot on the ground and start to release the free radicals and absorb the free electrons. There's biochemistry happening, there's psychological transformation happening, there's ancestral trauma healing happening. And it ain't gonna happen in any particular order, and it's not gonna happen by any particular like worksheet. If we don't come out here and be in it, it won't happen. And if somebody doesn't make it for a space for us to be in that, then we can't come out into it. And we have been torn from this. You know, we did not, people talk about the Great Migration where when Black people moved out of the South. What? Black people were burned and chased out of the South. We didn't just get up and go, oh, maybe we should go get a job in the city. No, we got tired of seeing people hanging from trees. My father went away to the army. He's from Alabama. He came home from the army after having been in Japan, came home. You know, this is a man from Alabama, one of 9 children, had never gone anywhere, hadn't been on a boat, much less a plane. He goes to Japan as a young Black man in the 50s and experiences something different. He comes back to Alabama and one of his high school friends is hanging from a light pole. He comes to he gets out of here and goes to California. He didn't go to California because he said, man, I don't know how I put up with this all this time. So I'm sorry if I'm going too far, you know, but if we don't create these spaces, no one's going to create them for us. And what I've seen by talking with people who are in the animal rights movement and the farm sanctuary movement is that there's no shortage of land, there's no shortage of resources, and we have, not we, but many people have prioritized the life of these animals in such a way to create spaces for them to live out their life in peace. Give thanks. We are in a collective state of trauma and paranoia. I mean, it can't be, this is the most important work. And I don't even know that it works. You know what I mean? Judging by myself, I'm not sure that it is actually working, but I do know that being on the TV or playing a video game or on a porn site or drink at the bar, none of those work. I know that. I know that that does not address what has happened from us being put into these heavily populated, heavily toxic urban areas. We must address it by removal. We have to alter something that is very, very fundamental, which is our environment. Last thing my teacher said, if you plant up your environment, you're not going to be the same person because your environment is going to dictate your behavior. You know, that goes back to Goody Mob. When Goody Mob said, I don't know if they put the bars up to lock us out or to lock us in. When you go to the projects, what are the bars up for? I mean, what is the gate for? Is it to keep crime out or to keep our butts in? So if we don't alter our environment, we can't ever expect our behavior to change.
What do you say after all of that? But I guess just to kind of reel it back, I think to your point, because you brought up sanctuaries, animal sanctuaries, we're all in need of sanctuary. And so, and we recognize the need for all life to have sanctuary. There was a time period when where we lived was our sanctuary, and that having been ripped from all life on this planet, our focus hasn't necessarily been in creating. No, I can't say that because I think it's my firm belief that in us providing sanctuary essentially for human animals, that it paves the way for all life to have sanctuary, right? Because we are the factor. We forced our way to these ideas of being on the top, and as a result of that, everything so-called beneath us has suffered as a consequence. And so when we realign ourselves and find ourselves in harmony and in balance, and everything else is allowed the space to breathe as itself and function as itself and as its role. And so we do this because we have to. We have to. It's not, it goes beyond want or desires or these utopian ideas. We have to, because it's literally for us, life or death. And we've done death for so long. And so we choose life, and not just for ourselves, because we don't exist for ourselves. You know what I mean? And so that's why for us, a Wally is a necessity. That's why the work is a necessity, so that we create space, like actually create tangible space, not in the ether, not in the conversation. And even if it's a small space, even if it's just like where we are 5 acres, but it's at least one space that we know within our control to a certain degree that is here, and we're doing our part in the larger work of our collective healing of the whole entire planet and all life across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you all so much for that, for all of that. And none of it is too much. And I really want to highlight and emphasize this point that I also heard you all say, in which you were speaking to, the centrality of land justice to food justice, and also this importance of rethinking, quote unquote, land ownership. So I'm wondering if you could, I know you've started speaking to that a little bit, not a little bit, you started speaking to that a lot already. I think it's really tied to that history as well. But, even just this idea of restructuring land ownership as well. Could you all talk about that for maybe people who haven't really started thinking about that, or maybe hearing this for the first time?
Yeah. No, I mean, all I think about, we can go back to that Exterminate the Brutes, right? With this documentary. And again, like information comes, and so ideas reshape and reform, and how we approach, even with answering the question. I'm just thinking though, now in the moment, watching this documentary, and it's speaking about essentially the land grab that happened in the US, and how land went from something that was collective and for the people, and we all shared it, and we all had our spaces within it, but it was still like collective land, collective responsibility, collective resource. And how with the coming of settler colonialism, that we get these ideas and concepts now within the theft of the land. Now it's what I've stolen, I have to make it my own private property to protect and to hold, because of the means of how I received it. And so when we look at these concepts of ownership, only, and how we perceive ownership is only coming from concepts of like a theft and protecting what was stolen, right? That's protecting something that was essentially in the beginning not yours to own in and of yourself anyway. That's where I think the rethinking and the reshaping comes in, at least for me, because I think first in the acknowledgement that that we are on land that was stolen and taken away and then made into private property. So having to address that, having to acknowledge that. So in the returning, in the reclaiming, we were reclaiming something and returning to the idea that it's for all of us. You know what I mean? It's for all life. We are all earthlings. Not one is above the other. No species or life form is above the other. We all, in a sense, have our own space on this planet where we can claim domain, not to have like dominion or lording over, but to be a part of and work and contribute to. And so that's where the reshaping of it comes from me, in the theory, at least. The logistics, that's a big one. Like how to navigate that, because we are in a heck of a system, that is, a lot has been put into ingraining it, and making sure that it's like it's locked in even into our consciousness and how we even view ourselves within where we are, you know. So that the logistics of how we dismantle that, whew, I can't, I wouldn't even, I don't feel equipped to have the answer to that, other than what it is that we're doing, you know.
Yeah, this is a powerful question, because
Yeah.
in considering the community that we're talking to, and I want to address farm sanctuary audience here and realize that land has been financialized, and therefore it is wealth, and therefore it is passed through inheritance often. And as JoVonna says, like, looking at these systems and trying to dismantle them could be daunting, and at the same time it can be very, very, very simple, because there are people bequeath land in their wills, people do land transfers. These things happen regularly from organizations to individuals. This is not something new. What I think is new is that during this time period, Bill Gates is the largest farmland owner in America, and he's not a farmer. So that's the new space that we're in, based on what JoVonna said, where the private property concept has come in only after it was stolen property, only after there was extermination of people. So once we start to really look at the property, then we look at animals,
exterminated all,
waterways, subterranean land rights and minerals, all of which are sentient beings. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to power our phones. They have some sort of energy, some sort of life force. So when we look at that, we have to now address the crimes, because those are all crimes that led to us being in this point. So what I see as the importance of the land is us partnering with the people who support the work of sanctuaries, people who support the work of animal rights. And we come to you to offer you an opportunity to expand your heart and your consciousness and your perspective. This is an opportunity, because, I mean, why would we be on here? We're talking because this is an opportunity to communicate with people many of whom who have inherited resources and may have not understood or trailed back what you have inherited. But as easy as it's come to you, it can be given forward. And what we would say is that it's now very important that those who love and know how to steward the lands of North America, of Turtle Island, are the ones who be in control. And that can happen through the ones who be not necessarily in control, thank you, but in stewardship. And let's look at the people who have demonstrated that they have the skills, that they have the care, that they have the intention, and look towards organizations that are training people in that way. And look at these pieces of land and start to create land trusts and land banks that are agricultural, non-development, and get this land secured quickly so that we can have the time to plant on it, because trees need to be planted, both deciduous and fruit trees. We gotta get these trees in the ground super fast, because much of what we're facing when it comes to toxic water and toxic air is based on the elimination of trees and the expansion of concrete. They're talking about having
our farmland for farmed animals.
Farmland for farmed animals is also contributing to it. And they're all now talking about technology for carbon sequestration. The best technology for carbon sequestration is a tree. So let's do that.
I think what you're speaking to is essentially what it shows is that there is room for collaboration across all of these platforms, across all of these movements. There are places where our work does intersect naturally, and so to continue to divide ourselves, you know, or to uphold our movements only in one instance, is only doing ourselves a disservice. Because I mean, this, from animal rights to land justice to, you know, restorative justice for human beings, they're all interconnected. Like all of our work, in a lot of ways, we may have different methodologies and how we go about it, but it's still all the same work at the end of the day.
And it all requires land.
Yeah,
it all requires land. So the existing sanctuaries we can already partner and have that collaboration where the animals are already there, the land is already secured. Let's now go in and get some orchards going so that in 5 years, as the supply chain for food continues to be dismantled from abroad, we start to fill in those holes for fresh local fruits and produce. Nut trees, berry vines, all of these high energy foods could be grown on these same tracts of land that are already being set aside for animal sanctuary. Instead of, it's a lot easier than trying to go into a feedlot that has been toxic for 15 years growing pigs and cows and chickens and try to rehabilitate that land. It's much more difficult to do that than to go to an animal sanctuary and start growing our grains, start growing amaranth and hemp and millet and sorghum on these same tracts of land so that we have food, fiber, fuel, because the supply chain for all agricultural products, all of them, is breaking down while we are receiving stimulus checks. At the same time, they are transitioning us into a digital economy with central bank digital currencies that are going to have expiration dates on them. They're going to be programmed to where that money, if it's not spent in a certain amount of time, it gets pulled out of your bank account. So we need to be ready. We've got to be ready because we're in a situation where we've already seen how fragile the supply chain is when it comes to products that we don't need, much less products that we do need. We can't expect other countries to be growing food for us when the oil is too expensive for them to ship it to us.
And going back to just, again, the connection though, it also, in that like scheme that you spoke about, it allows for the workers to do their work. You know what I mean? So in that sense, you bring justice to that dynamic as well. People who are stewards of the earth or who have that connection, they have now the space and they have the work to perform and to do so. Justice can be meted out in that way as well.
Layer upon layer upon layer.
Just to bring it all, like to connect it all. As far as it related to your question, as it related to land justice. So it hits everybody because it hits everybody in the adverse anyway. So,
yeah. Acres of Ancestry is doing some amazing work around the Black farmer land justice piece. Acres of Ancestry.
Acres of Ancestry. And I want to also name for folks too, thank you all for that, to name that this conversation will become available for those who are listening and in the audience around Juneteenth of this year.
Oh, wow.
And so to briefly explain that for folks who maybe aren't familiar with Juneteenth.
Juneteenth. On it. Wow.
So yeah, Juneteenth is for June 19th of 1865, which is when the announcement finally reached Galveston, Texas, to announce that Abraham Lincoln had put into effect the Emancipation Proclamation, which had actually happened 2.5 years earlier. So it's a holiday that's celebrated throughout the United States. And so Juneteenth is the combining of June and 19. So I'm curious though, what Juneteenth means to you all as Black farmers and growers, what that means to you.
Man, as soon as you said that, I just thought about like the new knowledge is coming to me. So my mother and my mother's family are from Texas. And we've been made aware that her grandfather had farms, not just one farm, like 3 farms in a very, very, very small city in Texas. And so the land piece, the farming piece in Texas is very much integral to my family, you know. And then I'm just thinking about, just personal stories of family members that were in enslaved in the South, in Texas, and their paths and their roads to freedom, even escaping. And this particular grandfather, specifically, he was the one who has said his story is that he was a runaway and he ran to, and I don't even know how this even works out, but he ran to Texas and from wherever he was before. And Texas is where he received his freedom and then went on to have a family and establish farms and essentially, well, ranches, because in Texas, there are ranches in Texas. So Juneteenth is like, whew, the significance of that. It's so layered because in a lot of ways, it can sometimes feel like we're still waiting to hear that so-called emancipation has come, because in a lot of ways, in how our lives look, we're still very much in bondage. We're still very much in bondage to that system in all areas of our lives. We only have the notion or false perception of freedom within that system. And so Juneteenth is more than a celebration, it's a reminder, that we're still moving through that, we're still trying to find our way to emancipation. We're still waiting for the word. It still hasn't come down yet, that Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation, So Juneteenth to me is just, it's a reflection of where we are and how much work we still need to do. Where we are and how much work we still need to do. But we still have our hands full with the work of dismantling that system. And even making, like, it's not something that we alone are oppressed by. Even the folks that may believe our systems and ideas, people who have ideas that they may believe that they are outside of that system, or they are outside of the oppression of that system. Like no, nobody escaped. Nobody escaped that. We were all slaves to that system. You know what I mean? Some of us got it in a more brutalized and terrorized way, but we are all oppressed. We have all been oppressed because the system, by design, is an oppressive system for everyone, everything involved and engaged in it. And like that's also the work, like that's where the conversation, I think, also needs to happen, is because there are those, because we have the conversations about privilege and the cost of that privilege. You know what I mean? The cost of that privilege, or to even think that privilege is a privilege to be proud of or to want to exist in, because that privilege is it's just gold-plated shackles in and of itself, And for us to realize that that's the only way that any of this is going to be dismantled, when we all recognize that we are one and the same in this oppression, So yeah, Juneteenth is just a reminder of the work that we still have to do.
I'm gonna take the next question.
Yeah. So to wrap us out, thank you, JoVonna. To wrap us out, I want to invite you all to share with folks how they can find out more about the work that you all are doing, how they can support you, like websites, whatever that may be. And also to kind of wrap up, was curious to hear from you all, imagining that we are in some distant future where we are much older than we are now. I'm curious to hear what you all hope we'll be able to say to the younger generations. I'm hearing the children in the background about what we were able to accomplish and how we got there.
Wow. Ooh. You go. Now
I want to be able to tell them to go pick all them grapes and go
Yes.
pick all them figs and go pick all them blueberries and bring them back into the house. And
Yeah.
you know, we're in a space now where the imagination is it's almost all we have, and the media has done a very good job of monopolizing that for the attention economy, right? And monopolizing it with nightmares, monopolizing it with horror stories. And so I think this is the time for a great unplugging, a great disconnect. And when we unplug and we disconnect, we have to be able to go somewhere and direct our attention somewhere else. So the importance of creating these external spaces like Awali is very important. And being able to share with our youth that we're home, right? We're home.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's, you just said it. Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
home. Beautiful. Beautiful.
And to answer the rest of your question, because you just summed it up. Yeah. Just the, yeah, you're home and you're safe and you can thrive. And yeah, you matter and all those things. But Awali, as it stands right now, we are developing. So to reach us, it would be right now through our email, which is info@awali.org, info@awali.org. There's Grow Where You Are has website, so growwhereyouare.farm. Everything's spelled out, growwhereyouare.farm. And then Maiato Foods is MAITU foods.com. That's the best way. And then, all of our handles at Maiato Foods, at Grow Where You Are.
There's a lot happening on this planet.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is good. Seeds. Don't take it from us. Learn from people who are doing it, who've been doing it for years. Dr. Vandana Shiva, Brother Pierre Rabhi, the countless people right now who are working to get their rights and their land back in the indigenous nations. Standing Rock, the farm workers, Acres of Ancestry. There are folks who touch this earth every single day and bring the fruits to us and we eat them. And then there are people who are paid to murder us and murder animals. That's a fact. And these facts are parallel with each other. So we're in a point now where our hearts they've got to open. The love of a heart spills over in the eyes. And we're full of water. Let's water some plants. You know what I mean? We got to do something. We got to hold these seeds, put them in the ground, water them, put our feet on the ground, see the sun, humble ourselves. John 9 has that beautiful song, humble me more and more.
We gotta care for one another.
Gotta care for one another. Because we know the violence that is constantly being projected at us to make us believe that it is the overriding energy on the planet, when it is not. The overriding energy on this planet is cooperation and unity. The plants, they're not in competition with each other. They're in cooperation with each other. Don't believe the hype.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both. Appreciate you all. Thank you for your wisdom, for your time, for your presence, your energy, all of that. So great to be in conversation with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eugene, JoVonna, and Miko. I got a lot out of that conversation, and I'm very grateful for the open-hearted sharing of that information. For anybody who wants more information about Grow Where You Are or the resources mentioned, check out the links below the video. And thank you all so much for tuning in.